National Park, Alaska. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org, and we're looking at live footage of a very large adult male brown bear fishing in the river. I'm, I'm alongside my co-host today, Naomi Boak with the Katmai Conservancy. Naomi, how are you?
I'm very well and very happy to see this very large brown bear in his classic pose.
Yes, that is number 151, as he's known on paper. He's maybe more affectionately known as Walker. Uh, and this is, probably 1,000 pound plus bear at Brooks River in Katmai National Park, Alaska right now. This is one of the best places in the world to watch brown bears fishing for salmon. And a little bit of trivia for anybody out there who cares. I think Walker may be the only bear that I ever nicknamed whose name stuck. So the story behind that is when he was a younger bear, he had really dark eye rings. So when he was, around sub-adult age or young adulthood, around 5 years old or so, and I was watching a lot of Walking Dead at the time. So the dark eye rings just sort of reminded me of some of the look of some of the zombies on The Walking Dead. So I just happened to call him Walker, and it ended up sticking. But anyway, that's that. But Naomi, it's a beautiful time of the year to be watching bears at the river.
Yes, it is. I'm just laughing at your playlist, The Walking Dead. I thought it would be a Star Trek name, but
Oh no, but we
maybe.
should, yeah, we should, if one ever comes back with like super pointy ears, we got to name it Spock or something.
Okay, for you, Mike.
Yeah, this is
It's
a spectacular time of the year to watch bears at Brooks River. The light right now, with the angle of it, really pretty. The sun is coming up later and later and later in the day and setting sooner and sooner and sooner in this part of the world right now as we progress into fall and winter. So yeah, the definition, the contrast, and the shadows, everything just seems to be so pretty right now, Naomi.
Yeah. No, it looks gorgeous, and the sun on all that water. It's it's beautiful.
And if you're wondering specifically where this is, if you're new to maybe the bear cams and Katmai National Park, let's take a quick tour to get there. So Katmai is in Brooks River specifically is located about 300 miles southwest of Anchorage, Alaska. And Brooks River itself is fairly short. It's only about a mile and a half long. So, maybe a couple of kilometers or so. And Brooks Falls bisects the river. In this view, it flows from left to right. And along with our webcam partner, the National Park Service, explore.org hosts and maintains several webcams on the river. The signal from those cameras is either sent to a couple of radio repeaters on Dumpling Mountain or directly sent to a satellite uplink internet connection. If they go to the radio repeaters, they're hopped to the small town of King Salmon, about 30 miles away, and then connected to the rest of the world. We have, again, many cameras at our disposal. So looking back at Brooks River, we can look at the Brooks Falls camera frequently because that seems to be where the bear activity is concentrated right now, although I think there's a lot of bears in other parts of the river. But the Brooks Falls camera looks across the river and downstream. The Riffles camera is located about 100 yards downstream of the falls, and it looks upstream towards the falls and across the river from there. Our River Watch camera is attached to the bridge across the river near the river mouth. It looks upstream from the bridge, and the area outlined in green is its line of sight. The underwater camera is attached to a piling on the bridge. It looks downstream. This is the underwater camera in its entirety. It is fixed in its location and its views, but maybe we'll see a bear swimming by. And then finally, we have Cat's River View, which looks out towards the river mouth and beyond. So with all of these different cameras, we have a really great opportunity to see many different portions of the river. And Naomi and I are also going to try to answer some viewer questions that were submitted in advance through Ask Your Bear Cam question. Thanks to everybody who submits questions to that. We don't have time to answer them all, but we do read each and every one of them. So I thank you for doing that. Look for the link in the partner tab. If you're watching on explore.org, on the Bear Cam page is there, or ask a moderator for the link to that if you were watching from somewhere else. But Naomi, Walker is one of those bears that, has, I think, come of age since Bear Camp first started. In 2012, he would have kind of been, an unknown on the river, one of those maybe random subadults that we see walking around, and not people really wouldn't have paid, I don't think, that much attention to him, but he is definitely one of the larger and more dominant bears in the river now.
Yeah, and it's been very interesting to watch his development um, from kind of a shy bear, right? Who would he would hang out in the riffles, do most of his fishing there, really not fishing on the lip or competing with other big bears until the last few years. And he's testing his mettle these days. And but this year, I think he's holding back because of 32 chunk.
There are few bears that can displace him now. And again, one of the wonderful things that we get to see on the cams is these younger bears growing into these very large adults. It can be really hard to imagine when you see a little bear, trying to think about them as the size of Walker or Chunk or 856 or any of the other adults really. But they grow so fast. They change their behaviors to compete with one another as best they can. And Walker, he's just a healthy looking dude. I mean, he's had another really great summer.
Yeah. And it's interesting, he hasn't been fishing on the lip this year, which he was a lot a couple of years ago. And I think that has to do with his reservations about other dominant bears on the river, including those dominant females who fish the lip.
Yeah, even in the in the absence of that fishing spot for him this year, again, he's not been on the lip of the falls a lot this year. He's done again incredibly well for himself, really fat, and he's going to get fatter. He still has a few more weeks of salmon fishing to do, and right now he's looking for some of the fresher salmon that are maybe looking for their preferred spawning site up at the falls. There's the shallow water over there where he's sitting right now. The salmon sometimes swim right underneath the bear's noses. So he's just looking for them to come into the close proximity so he can pounce on them. We were seeing him earlier licking his lips a lot. And a lot of times people wonder, why do bears do that? We don't really know. It seems like some bears do it more than others, though. There are some bears that's like almost one of their defining characteristics.
Yeah, like 856. It's one of the ways I can spot him is his lip licking. That's another favorite spot of Walker's right there. I have pictures of him from the last 5 years by that rock.
Bears are certainly creatures of habit. They will sometimes, even after more than a year of absence, they might just walk right back to the river and they'll just sit down in the same spot. It's like they don't forget how to fish, but it's like they never took a day off either. And some of the bears that we haven't seen since July, for instance, if they come back to the river this month, I think it's highly likely that we'll see them doing the exact same thing that they did in July, as long as the salmon are available in the same places. That's maybe the defining factor. Or even a bear that like we haven't seen at all during the summer, for instance, like if Otis happened to show up, which I know a lot of people are hoping for, and we're hoping that Otis comes back, even though we didn't see him earlier in the year. Or I can think of like 821, for instance, who's a growing young adult male who was looking big and healthy last year. We didn't see him in July. If he happened to show up, I think we can expect that he would just slot right into the falls like he was just there yesterday.
Well, and it's positive reinforcement, right? When they have success in a certain area of the river, they're going to remember that.
Yeah, and that's something to always keep in mind if you happen to live or you like to recreate in bear country. If bears find something that's easy and rewarding, they're going to do it again and again and again. So, like for example, if you decide, hey, I'm just going to leave my pet food out on my porch, and a bear gets into it, the bear's going to come back looking for more pet food, because a bag of dog food or cat food or whatever is thousands and thousands of calories. So bears would relish that. Same with like bird seed. and things like that. So if we remove those temptations, the bears are unlikely to learn to associate, or less likely to learn to associate our, buildings and our possessions with food, and that helps to keep them out of trouble and helps to allow us to coexist with them a bit more easily.
And also Walker is allowed to be in this spot right now because there's not competition. If 128 Grazer were around, this is a spot she likes to fish at this time of year, and she I don't think she'd allow him to stay there.
She might not. We definitely have seen that he will yield to Grazer. I think he just has had too many negative encounters with her, and she's such a tough and fierce and brave bear that she will tangle with bears that are larger than her. And Walker's definitely bigger than her, but he just decides, you know what, it's just not worth it because she's a bit too tough for me, and I can make a living without having to challenge her. We think about the hierarchy at Brooks Falls. Or I should say, it's easy to think about the hierarchy at Brooks Falls as this linear stair step thing, but it's often quite messy amongst all of the bears. They all have different preferences for each other, different tolerances for one another. Some bears may not like other bears as much as some other bear, another bear might. So that's one of the interesting things to watch with this relationship between Walker and Grazer. If Grazer happens to come back and they interact, Grazer will yield space to maybe some of these other adult males that Walker may be more dominant than on a male and male basis. But when you put them all together in the same space, Naomi, you see that Walker might displace this one bear, but then Grazer will yield to that other bear that Walker displaced, and then Walker will yield to Grazer.
Yeah, well, and it does show that bears learn, right? He's learned to be careful around 128 Grazer.
Well, things are kind of stable up at Brooks Falls. Let's head down to the river mouth right now. Yeah, beautiful day at Brooks River. I'm a little surprised we're not seeing more bears down here. Maybe they're just a little bit delayed coming back from some of their other fishing locations at this time of the year. But the river mouth area, all of these slow moving areas, the wide portions of the river, the areas on the edges of the marshes where the grasses are growing, those are places where a lot of salmon carcasses happen to collect. So it's a good spot to be watching for bears um, at this time of the year, and especially out at that river mouth area in the morning, like right at daybreak.
Mm.
That's one of the best places that in September that I can think of, Naomi, to watch bears at
Yeah.
Brooks River. Like if you tune in on the cams on daybreak and it's not super foggy like it was this morning, there often can be like 8 or 10 bears sometimes swimming out in the river mouth.
Yeah, I always love like either when I lived in camp, going out to the beach first thing, or if I'm coming into work from the other side, I end up hanging out on the bridge in the lower river. You know, Mike, it looks pretty windy out there today, and that may be one reason we're seeing fewer bears.
Yeah, it could be. The hypothesis is that the wind happens to not inhibit a bear's sense of smell, but it makes it more difficult for bears to locate and investigate things through their sense of smell. And since bears are so reliant on their sense of smell, they just might be a bit more wary on windy days. But cutting back to our river watch camera right now, there is a young bear moving on the edges of the marshes right now. You can see him picking his or her nose up in the air, scenting just a little bit as they're walking along.
Yeah, maybe another indication of the wind, right? Nose up in the air, looking for scents.
It does seem, quite reasonable to conclude that, yeah, with the winds blowing hard and swirling, it just makes it harder for bears to figure out who's in the vicinity. So, are you if you catch the scent of another bear, and the wind's blowing hard, does that mean it came from your left or your right or in front of you, or some gust of wind from behind you? How does it dilute the sense of smell, or excuse me, the actual smell of the other bears? So those are all, yeah, I think, maybe questions that the bear is unconsciously maybe factoring into its decision making process on these days. And then, but this bear, Naomi, also looking for any opportunities to present itself, and walking along the riverbank is one of those ways that bears can find meals at this time of the year, because there's a lot of salmon that have already spawned and are beginning to die in the river. And sometimes they just get caught up in those grasses or those little nooks and crannies right on the river's edge. And I think that's what this bear found here.
Yeah. And it's also a reminder for us that a younger bear like this, who is so much smaller than a big bear like 151 Walker, this bear has a lot of opportunity in the coming months, 6 weeks, to really fatten up on all those dead and dying salmon in the lower river, and without competing with big bears like Walker.
Yeah, that's a good point, because, and we also actually got an audience question about that. Nancy was wondering about the younger bears that look skinnier than the real big bears up at the falls. So Nancy wrote in and asked, "Will young skinny bears make it through hibernation?" And yeah, I think you can, you know, rest pretty assured that, unless a bear is facing some sort of like health crisis at the moment, as far as like, if it's injured or it's fighting infection or some disease or something like that we can't see, uh, any bear that really kind of appears healthy at the river right now, at least as far as its mobility goes, has a fantastic opportunity to survive hibernation. Naomi, we were talking about this before the program, and in this question, because the bears that we see like up at Brooks Falls, we see Walker, we see, hopefully we'll get to see maybe like Chunk or somebody later today, but they set the curve. So when we're comparing these younger bears that are maybe only like a few years old, or maybe on their own for the first time this summer, or their second summer on their own, they don't look nearly as fat as these big guys, because the big guys have all the advantages and for access to fishing opportunities. But their level of fatness shouldn't indicate that other bears are necessarily struggling in the ecosystem. It's just that they set the curve. They're like on one end of the spectrum, essentially.
Right. Yeah. It's not fair to compare them to these big guys, right? They their their fatness can be a lot less than a bear like Walker, and they can be just fine. And it doesn't take as much to sustain them, right? So they can be eating those dead and dying salmon, fatten up, and be just fine for hibernation.
They are also growing their skeleton, while a bear like Walker really isn't devoting much energy to his skeleton. Adult bears in Katmai have access to so much food that they do continue to grow their frame once they reach once they're beyond 10 years old, but their growth rate really slows down, um, kind of considerably after that, at least as far as like their skeleton goes. They'll still gain body mass at a greater rate, but their skeletal growth really slows down after like 9, 10 years of age, especially for female bears, because female bears are devoting so much energy towards raising cubs typically. But these younger bears, they are not only trying to gain body mass to survive winter hibernation, they're also growing their frame as well. So sometimes that can make them look lankier, less well filled in than the big adult bears. Like Walker, up at the falls, he just again, he's not growing his frame, so he's not putting really much energy into his skeleton other than just sort of like basic maintenance, repairing the bones and remodeling the bones just to keep them strong and healthy, as all vertebrates do. But these younger bears are also, they're doing that plus putting on height and length, as well as width. And also one
and
other point on this too, Naomi, you mentioned how they can make a living on the smaller bears on vegetation easier. And if you're a smaller bodied bear, it is much easier for you to gain enough nutrition to survive on vegetation than it is for the really big bears like Walker and 747 and Chunk. They need much higher levels of protein and fat in their diet than these younger bears, the or smaller bears. Smaller bears they can pull nutrition out of vegetation, not necessarily more efficiently, but they're just smaller bodied. So the amount of energy that they can pull out, it works out for their bodies overall. While the bigger bears up at the falls and elsewhere along the river, they just need a much higher proportion of fat. So if the salmon run happened to collapse, one year at Brooks River, it would be kind of hard for some of these really big guys who are highly dependent on salmon. It may be easier actually for like a young subadult bear who is only like 3 or 4 years old to survive that period of time without fish.
yeah, I mean, and the salmon would really have to collapse, right? I mean, because um, when it's harder to find salmon, these big guys are going to have, and dominant ones are going to have access to their prime fishing spots where they're most successful, right? Where others might have fewer places to successfully fish. But yeah, if the run really did collapse and it's equal fishing for all, these guys would have a harder time.
And it's never equal fishing for all because, yeah, again, in those situations where there's high competition for fishing spots up at Brooks Falls, the big guys, they have the advantage in size and strength. So typically they're able to access the most productive fishing spots. No competition at the falls for Walker right now. So again, as far as we know, he's pretty much solo up here. Um, The Riffles camera is quiet as well, but we've had some interactions, Naomi, between different bears at the river. In fact, we mentioned him earlier in the broadcast just kind of by his identification number 856. And we've also mentioned Chunk uh, earlier in the broadcast too. But these two bears have kind of been longtime rivals on the river. And if we go to a highlight from yesterday, we can see the camera just catches sort of the tail end of this, but number 32 on the left and number 856 on the right. 32 got into 856's face, just decided to, I think, remind him that he's more dominant than 856, and he just turned and walked away, basically saying, like, I think you're no threat to me.
Yeah, this still is shocking to me, right? I mean, with all these years of 856 being the dominant bear on the river from a relatively young age, and he's not this year. I mean, he may be third in the hierarchy. But, maybe age, and maybe he's a wise bear and knows how to survive well being an older bear, which he is now.
That adaptability and that ability of bears to adapt to changing circumstances is one of the things that I think prolongs their longevity. Because again, if 856 tried to compete with bears like he had done 5, 6 years ago when he was sort of like, yeah, again, he was the most dominant bear on the river, and even more recently when he still held that rank. I think things would be much more difficult for him. He would maybe face more injury. Certainly, he would get in more fights because the other bears would look at him and be like, "I'm calling your bluff, dude. You really want to mess with me?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, let's fight." And then he would get in a fight and he would get hurt. So again, yeah, being adaptable is one of the most probably important behavioral characteristics that we see in successful bears. And 856 is a super successful bear, even though he has taken maybe a few steps back in the hierarchy this year, probably just due to age and competition. He's not a young bear anymore. He's in his early 20s.
It also shows how smart they are, right? I mean, that's part of the adaptability. I mean, they're quick to recognize changing circumstances. And I mean, you'd be a fool to continue the same behavior over and over again that worked for you before and isn't working for you anymore. So it's and we've seen bears do that again and again. I mean, Otis is really a prime example of adaptability and how he changed over the years.
This is another replay from a clip from yesterday, but a similar situation. Chunk just walked over to 856 just to remind him, hey, I'm the boss. You need to just, stand still and let me show off for a little bit. 856 is like, yeah, man, you're cool. Whatever. I'm going to hang out here. But then Chunk goes over to a spruce tree and decides to mark it just for a little bit of extra showboating. So tree marking is it can be a visual display for bears. It's also a it's a chemical form of chemical communication as well, because other bears are going to be walking by in the future and realizing, hey, Chunk was here. Chunk did his thing. But what a belly on him, huh, Naomi?
I muted myself. Yes, what a belly. I mean, we don't often get to see that belly from that view. We just so thank you, Chunk.
Yeah,
Can
he's
he
a
still?
giant guy. I mean, I think I think he's at least a 1,200-pound bear right now. He's a really big bear.
Yeah, and there's still time. I mean, he's going to get fatter, which is astounding.
Chunk wasn't, of course, hasn't been the only bear marking trees. 856 does it still. So this is a clip from, I think, a couple of days ago where he walks over to a tree just and marks it. Bears do this, I think, when they're itchy, but this marking behavior on trees is again very much a form of chemical communication. Curiously, though, Naomi, I anecdotally to me, uh, it seems like bears mark conifers more than they happen to mark deciduous trees. And I don't know why that is, or at least maybe the marking on the conifers is just longer lasting because there's like pitch on the bark and that captures bear hair more easily. Uh, I'm not sure if that's true or not. I need to do some more reading to see if anybody's actually investigated that or not. But around Brooks River, it seems like they definitely mark like the spruce trees much more than they mark the birches or anything else.
I mean, is it the location of, I mean, where the trees are too? I mean, just in terms of like here, this was clearly a dominance gesture because he was cowboy walking before he rubbed against that tree, right? He wasn't just, oh, I gotta scratch this itch and maybe someone will walk by. He was cowboy walking, which meant he was showing who he is and that he's a big dominant bear in this instance. But I don't know. Is it that a lot where those trees are in terms of where there might be dominance displays or mating opportunities?
It could be. Bears are going to mark things more frequently on their well traveled routes. So if a tree's on a bear trail, it's more likely to get marked than a tree that's in a random place where bears aren't visiting, of course. So yeah, I think there's maybe a variety of factors. Some of the vegetation, like the willows. I mean, they will mark the willows, and that's why, like at Brooks Falls, there's no vegetation on the island downstream of Brooks Falls because the bears just marked up any shrub that was on there, and they were all deciduous trees like willows, and they just destroyed them over time. So yeah, perhaps it's just maybe more ephemeral. I'm not quite sure, but Walker still doing his thing, practicing his patience as we get back to live footage here. We're about halfway through our broadcast. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org. I'm joined today by Naomi Boak from the Katmai Conservancy. And
I
I
will
hope
say one.
that we get to. Sorry, go
I
ahead,
want to say
Naomi.
one other thing about marking trees. If any of you visit Brooks on the trail to Brooks Falls, look at those trees because there is a lot of bear fur on those trees. They are well marked because bears like easy routes and trails too. Why should they bushwhack through the woods when they can take a trail? So look for bear fur on the trees.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you'll see. You can sometimes see if you look closely, you'll see dozens of trees that have been marked by a bear at some point in time along the roads and on the trails at Brooks Camp. The first I remember the first time walking the Brooks Falls Trail and kind of being amazed by the amount of bear sign that was on it, and I was thinking, what did I get myself into coming here? But I learned to love it very quickly, especially scenes like this with the colors, the turquoise of the water, the bear walking on the shoreline. This is the same bear we saw eating a fish upstream on a river watch camera earlier. So he or she has migrated down to the river mouth again, scavenging, looking for anything that can't swim away at this point in time. But yeah, the color of the water on days like this in Naomi is just incredible.
Yeah, and you can see the difference in the color. What you're seeing behind that bear is Naknek Lake, which is a glacial lake, and then in front of the spit is the river, and such a clear difference in the color of those two bodies of water.
Yes, lots of glacial flour, as it's known in Naknek Lake, and the glacial flour is basically just pulverized rock. It really is pulverized by the movement of ice over the earth. In this case, in the volcano on the tops of the volcanoes in Katmai, it pulverizes the rock to a point where it's just as fine as like bleached white flour. So it doesn't tend to settle out of the water column very quickly. And then you get overturn in the water column throughout the different times of the year. You get the wind helping to keep the waters churning as well. So that just helps to keep those sediments in suspension. And those sediments end up refracting light in a similar manner as the molecules of air reflect light. So that's the sky is blue because of light being refracted, excuse me, through it. Same thing happens with the glacial flour.
Also, while we were looking at the
Oops, my
beautiful
internet's
colors in the lake, we had a flyby of two eagles. Those are park boats there.
oh hey, I'm back. Naomi, you
Okay.
still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know what point in my glacial flour information my internet dropped, but it ended up dropping for a little
Well,
while.
I interjected about the flyby of two eagles. So
Okay,
just don't leave me for the rest of the broadcast like you did a couple of years ago.
I will try not to. Yeah, we just have
Okay.
to look at a still frame of an owl or something or whatever that happened to be. The typical behavior of this brown bear here, again, looking in areas where it knows that salmon are likely to collect um, on this really sunny afternoon here. It wasn't so sunny at Brooks River earlier today, though, Naomi. Like if you were on the East Coast, it was easy to see because something like 7 a.m., 7:30 is after 11 a.m. Eastern time where we happen to be. But this is the scene. I think sometime around 7:45 a.m. Alaska time. So super foggy at the river, but if you went up on top of the mountains, same time, different location, it was an absolutely amazing day. We just had this fog bank rolling in from Bristol Bay, covering the lowlands. And Brooks River again is uh, almost 40 miles from the Bering Sea, but it seemed like there's just one of those days where the fog happened to roll in uh, from the King Salmon and Naknek area and filling the lowlands. So you were truly above the clouds on Dumpling Mountain, but swimming in the clouds down at Brooks River this morning.
Yeah. An example of why pilots need to know what the weather is because it's very different from one place to another. and not all the planes have computerized navigation. So some of them are still navigating by sight.
Yes, they do use, of course, GPS, but yeah, they don't necessarily have the instrumentation that something like a big commercial jet will have. So yeah, line of sight, being very careful of the weather is extraordinarily important to stay safe flying small planes here in Alaska. I'm wondering if this bear will ever take some time to graze on some vegetation. I mean, we often see this in this vicinity, kind of like along the roadways where
Yeah,
the few vehicles that pass by help to keep a little bit of the vegetation trimmed.
there's a spot as this bear is approaching the south gate of the bridge, and there's a spot in there that bears seem to like the vegetation right about where that bear is now. But the bear seems like it's on a mission, or maybe it's stopping there. There's something in there that they really like.
Nearly any time you watch a bear, you can see that they're making choices, and these are specific choices that they're making uh, to maximize whatever, I don't know what their survival. Uh, with vegetation too, uh, they at this time of the year they're for the most part going to be ignoring any of the tall older grasses. It's just not worth it for them. But what they will be doing is occasionally grazing on some of the shorter grasses because just like when you mow a lawn, what grows back happens to be a little richer in protein, a little more tender, a little bit more digestible for a bear, especially like a bear. Of course, all bears are, evolved from carnivores, even though they're omnivores right now. So their digestive tract isn't quite where it needs to be uh, to survive on rough vegetation like a deer could or a moose, or name your herbivore. Really, bears are omnivores, but their digestive tract doesn't have the same adaptations to make a living off of veg as easily as herbivores do. So they really do seek out the tenderest, most digestible vegetation that they can. Walker's still up at the falls doing his thing. This young bear making circles along the river's edge right now. So this is on a river watch camera. Again, this is upstream from the bridge. We were looking at our catch a river view that was downstream of the bridge just a minute ago. Um, so and sometimes people could think, hey, this bear's spending a lot of energy walking around. And in a sense, it is. But we know that it's already eaten one salmon during our broadcast today. It's probably had some others that it's been able to scavenge here and there. And a spawned out sockeye salmon could be something like 1,300, 1,500 calories. So just a few of those per day for a bear of this size is going to be a pretty good day for it and allow it to gain body mass.
Mike, we saw some fun activity in the lower river earlier today. I think we have a clip of that.
We do actually, yeah. So let me bring this up as our young bear disappears into the woods. So we've been seeing, some bears playing throughout the summertime. And these are two adult males that engage in a bout of play in a little bit here. But one of them does something I think that I've never really seen a bear do in the water, which is quite fascinating. Uh, we talk about the competition that bears experience at the river, but it's not all competition. It's not all combat. Uh, there's definitely moments where they experience, I think, fun, maybe even enjoy in their lives, and these two bears engaging in a bit of a play fight uh, took a moment to experience some of the some more leisure activities.
Yeah, I love to watch bears play fight. And look at this.
Yeah, it's like
Is that
jumping up and down in the water on its hind legs. I've never seen a bear play like that before. I'm gonna back this up.
I've never seen a bear play like that. I think there's a nickname in the offing here, Mike.
I mean, yeah, it's almost like it, like it's on a trampoline. But I don't think it could do that if it was on dry land. The water helping to keep the bear a bit more buoyant. Um, but yeah, really interesting and fun to see that bear bouncing in the water like that, jumping on its hind legs up and down, engaging the other adult male in just a little bit of play.
Oh, and if we see in the background, we see Walker snorkeling back there
Yeah, so
while he's
he made the rounds earlier
advanced.
today. Oh, and more jumping in the water. Interesting how the bear with its back towards this name, he doesn't necessarily reciprocate that same movement or activity, but
Yeah.
again, it's realizing that hey, this is a friendly encounter. Uh, Bears are very good at reading the body language of other bears, so they know when a bear is feeling defensive. They know when a bear is feeling curious. They know when a bear is feeling playful. Uh, the bear that was jumping, as we head back to the beginning of this clip, it has a little bit of a stick or something that it's playfully mouthing. Um, Gives a little head twirl right here, like, hey, I'm feeling pretty playful. Could have made, maybe a little bit of an exhale or something like that, to engage, I think 903, who's the bear with its back towards us right now. But yeah, that jumping in the air is something that I don't think I've ever seen before. So this is a really great thing to capture on video.
It is. There's always a surprise, right, Mike? I mean, we could say with authority that bears do this and bears do that, and then they prove us wrong.
Yeah, that's 100% true. With you read about the average bear that's based on like data from studies of many different bears across like an entire landscape, but there is no such thing as an average bear, just like there's no such thing as like the average human being.
Yeah, I love this. Now, of course, I can't tell what bear that is. Can you?
um I thinking maybe the bear that bear camp viewers have been calling number 208. That bear has a
Oh,
scar or a wound on its his is it right hip, I think. So we didn't see him standing out of the water, but it seemed to be a high likelihood that maybe it was 208 in that instance.
okay. Well, someone will tell us.
Yes,
All
if
the
I'm correct
expert,
or incorrect.
right? All the expert bear ideas out there will let us know, and then that bear is going to get a new nickname, and I don't know what that's going to be. But and there's Walker, patient Walker.
Yeah, still doing the same things at the falls that he did at the beginning of the broadcast. Again, bears are extraordinarily patient when they know that food will come to them. It's it's amazing to watch. At the beginning of the season, maybe they show a little less patience just because they are so hungry at this time of the year. And maybe Walker was able to scavenge salmon, or he had some meals before the broadcast, uh, so he's maybe more willing to wait his turn. He won't do this for days and days without catching a fish. He will try different strategies. Maybe that's a different fishing spot up at Brooks Falls. Maybe that's scavenging salmon elsewhere along the river. So if things don't work out for him, he will, again, adapt. Just like we saw, examples of 856 adapting to greater competition that he's facing. Bears do the same thing. They'll show their adaptability depending on whether or not food is available to them. So that could be moving to a different spot in the river, maybe a different spot at Brooks Falls. If they go many days, maybe without experiencing success at Brooks River, they might go somewhere else completely. Although at this time of the year, Brooks River tends to be the place, the one of the last places where bears can fish for salmon.
Mike, I have a question about patience. I'm I'm assuming that bears have different degrees of patience, right? Um, and I wonder if Walker learned some of his patience hanging out near Otis, which he has done for many years.
I don't know. Uh, it's possible that like a young I'm convinced that young bears learn by watching other bears, not just by watching their mothers, but by watching other unrelated bears. I think there's enough evidence of how bears, learn to fish the falls to suggest that that's a phenomenon that happens within bears. Whether they can learn patience though from another bear, I don't know. Um, they can learn patience, I think, by circumstance that they experience. So I think that's certainly true. And here's just a great example. Walker, again using the far pool for the last hour plus, not having success and finally getting success. So I think they can learn it through their own personal experiences. Um, but again, I don't know if they would learn that specifically from watching other bears. It'd be one of those things. Again, we'd have to ask. What do you think?
Yeah, I know. They just refuse to answer. They're stubborn that way. But
Right now, Walker disappeared into that shadow on the far side of the falls. I think our camera operator is going to maybe try to give us a look here in just a little bit, or maybe it's just our view is just going to be a little pixelated, not be able to see him there. But that was a spawning sockeye salmon, bright red colors across most of its entire body. Sometimes we'll see some bears at this time of the year catching silver salmon, or also called coho salmon. Those fish may not be in their spawning colors quite yet, but if they are in spawning colors, look for a greenish olive colored back and more pinkish sides compared to the sockeye, which have a deep red body, males and females.
so, Mike Carroll had a question about the fish staging in the river this year.
That's right. Yeah. So Carol did. So let me bring that question up as we watch Walker eating this fish. Carol wrote in and asked, after it rains, the water over the falls runs faster. Does this impede the fish, or do higher water levels make it easier to jump? I think there's a threshold of water level in the river, both too low and too high, where the salmon wouldn't necessarily be able to navigate the falls. But a little more water, actually, I think is pretty good for the fish. So in years where we have higher water levels in the river, if fishing is difficult for the bears, that could mean that maybe it's better for the salmon because they just have more escape routes. Uh, they have more water to swim through before they jump out into the air to get up above the falls itself. One of the things, though, that really helps to buffer the water flow through the river is Lake Brooks, because the water from Brooks River comes from a lake. So even if there's like a day's worth of rainy weather, it's not like you see dramatic fluctuations in water flow through the river. It's very slow changes from on a day-to-day basis. So the lake really does help to buffer the water flow through the river, and that's one of the reasons why this is such productive salmon spawning habitat as well. So yeah, it's a good question. I think if there was some sort of catastrophic flooding of the river, which we've never seen historically at Brooks River, then yeah, maybe the salmon would have a difficult time with it. If there was some sort of extreme drought, the salmon would have a hard time with it. But just on a day-to-day basis, if there's a little bit of extra water or a little less, the salmon usually do pretty well.
Also, Lily had a question, which I think refers to where we're seeing walker fish.
Yeah, let me bring up Lily's question here. So Lily wrote in, I have noticed that less bears are using the jacuzzi. They are fishing more by the far pool. Is this because the salmon run is dying down? Lily, I definitely think you're onto something there. The the far pools where Walker is right now seems to be an area where salmon will move around again as they're looking for like their precise spawning site. While the jacuzzi seems to be a place we haven't really got a good look at it so far during the broadcast today because there haven't been bears over there. But let me bring up just a photo of it real quick. This is from in the jacuzzi or just on the outside of it, kind of between the camera and the waterfall, the webcam that is. That's a place that salmon seem to be using more or less trying to get above the fall. So if they're migrating, they're jumping there. But in later in the year, the sockeye migration really right now is pretty much done. There may be a few fish that try to jump the falls occasionally, a few sockeye that is, but the migration period for the sockeye is pretty much over, and the vast majority of the salmon in Brooks River are sockeye salmon. So I think with that dynamic going on right now, the bears have realized that, hey, the jacuzzi's maybe just not the best spot to be, and I think that's maybe why they're we see a lot of these big bears like Walker, like 856, and Chunk currently trying to use the far pool.
Yeah, we see them over there this time of year a lot. Um, 747 likes to be over there. 856, they classically have competed for spots over there. Looks like Walker's smelling something.
Yeah, and he may be smelling this other bear walking in front of
There you
our
go.
falls low camera, which is yeah at the falls as well. We haven't gone to it today because there hasn't been much activity, but he probably was paying attention to that bear on the far side. The river's not that wide. It's from riverbank from from north to south, and basically we're kind of looking more or less north from this view right here, or a little bit to the northwest. Uh, the river itself is, I think, a little less than 50 yards wide in this vicinity. And if you're within 50 yards of another bear in Katmai, you're definitely going to be paying attention to it. That seems to be one of those distance thresholds that we see bears interact with one another. If they're within 50 yards, they're much more likely to interact than if they are more than 50 yards away. And that's based on some research, I think, out of McNeil River, north of Katmai as well, where that was one of the first places where the behavior of bears gathering at a waterfall was described. So and we can apply a lot of those findings to what we see at Brooks River too.
Mike,
They're
when did they
definitely in
start?
it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it seems like Walker's nostrils there were really wide open, really inhaling a lot of air as he was looking downstream. I'm not sure which bear that was that happened to walk
Yeah,
by, but this seems to be moving. I don't know if it's moving in his Walker's vicinity or not.
it's a big one that walked by. Of course, we can say that about a lot of bears this time of year. I was going to ask you when did they start doing that research at McNeil?
That was the 1970s.
Okay.
Prior to that, there was research done out of Yellowstone at like garbage dumps, for instance, back in the dump days where, instead of trucking tourist trash out of the park, they just dumped it in the middle of the park out of sight from the tourists, typically, not always. Sometimes they made it an attraction. But yeah, there was some descriptions of bear behavior from those situations, which do approximate bears fishing at a waterfall. There's really nothing less natural about it than what the bears are doing at a waterfall. It's just sort of different circumstances. But the first sort of like non-human caused aggregation of bears that was described, I think, that research really came out of McNeil River in the 70s. So not that long ago, really.
And for those who don't know, McNeil is a state preserve, state park, and a great place to go. There's a lottery to be able to go there. They only allow 10 people at a time, so it's quite a viewing opportunity.
Bears of McNeil River and Katmai bears are essentially one and the same. It's a larger population on the northern Alaska Peninsula. And we know that bears in Katmai will move, not from Brooks River, it's too far away, but from like the northern coast of Katmai or the preserve area of Katmai, they will move to the McNeil River vicinity and vice versa. So Naomi, it looks like that bear that we had just caught a glimpse of on the Falls Low camera is moving to the far pool right now. I wonder, it's a big bear, so maybe that's Chunk coming back into view here. And if
I think it is.
so, Yeah, if he moves up into that far pool area, then I think we might see Walker definitely give him some space.
Walker is definitely paying attention.
It's again, it's real subtle, but Walker giving a bit of a yawn there. That's probably not because he's tired. Maybe it's just a little bit of a sign of stress from him. Bears, that's one thing that they'll do when they're a little stressed out. They'll give a yawn, looking over his shoulder. Certainly, he's trying to fish at the same time, but he's a little distracted in this moment, making sure that that other bear isn't going to walk up behind him.
Yeah. Weighing and balancing. Fishing, safety. Safety, fishing. Yeah, he's paying attention there. It's interesting. The yawning behavior of Walker. I've seen. Here he goes again, yawning again. Seen him do that frequently when he's stressed out. I mean, he did that around me the first time we met on the Valley Road.
And now
Yep.
a Walker moving away from the approach of the other bear. This is a classic, avoidance behavior. Just don't engage. Sometimes again, you just want to be, you want to show discretion if you want to fight to, live to fight another day. So Walker just moving out of the way. Maybe the fishing spot today wasn't, productive enough for him to try to remain. Maybe if he was catching more fish there, Naomi, he could have. But at the same time, yeah, again, your rivals. You don't have to, you don't have to compete with them each and every time in the same way. Once you've figured out who's more dominant than who, it's much easier for the bears to interact. And usually at this time of the year, we see much less physical combat between them because they know each other.
Yeah. I mean, and it's also helps them be successful, right? I mean, if you don't have to be fighting, getting potentially injured or expending all that energy, if you don't have to be doing that all the time, then you can fish and get fat. Although I think because the hierarchy has been a little fluid this year for a while, we may see a little more of that because, I mean, we've seen that from 856 in past years where he will just go up to another bear just to say, hey, I'm the most dominant bear here. He didn't really have to. And Chunk may feel like he has to do that since this is really his first year at the top of the hierarchy. But right now he doesn't
And
have to
this
worry about it.
and this is definitely Chunk. You can see his distinctive scar across his muzzle, big-bodied bear, blocky muzzle. So those are a couple of ways that I happen to identify him. And Naomi, I think Chunk was doing, just what you described when we looked at those clips earlier of him getting in the face of 856. Those weren't necessarily over fishing spots. He just wanted to remind 856 of who's boss. And the advantage, your point is really sound too. The point that if you're a dominant bear, you have advantage. Chunk doesn't have to worry about other bears displacing him because he is so dominant this year. So that's one of the great advantages of being a big guy like this.
Mike, he has kind of pointy ears. Just saying.
Yeah, not quite what I'm looking for though. But
Okay.
but
I'll
anyway,
keep my eyes open.
yeah, keep your eyes open. But it's been great to talk with you today, Naomi. We're almost out of time. So we're going to be back online tomorrow, right, for another play-by-play, 7 p.m. though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun.
So
And a better hour for bears, too.
7 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. So tomorrow, that is September 4. My name is Mike Fitz with Explore.org. My co-host today has been Naomi Boak with the Katmai Conservancy. So we hope you join us tomorrow for our next play-by-play broadcast. Until then, enjoy Chunk, enjoy Walker, enjoy all the young bears and the salmon that you see at Brooks River. And we will talk to you soon.